It was a scorching afternoon, the kind of day that left you gasping for air the moment you stepped outside. I had just finished a quick grocery run with my 4-year-old daughter, Emma. The sun beat down relentlessly as I unloaded the bags into the car, Emma already pulling at her seatbelt in the back, eager to get home and cool off. But as I reached the front of the car, I froze. The sound of a car, doors slamming, echoed through the parking lot. My eyes shot up just in time to see Karen, the HOA president, marching toward her car, purse swinging wildly by her side. I barely recognized her behind her typical tight, angry smile. Something about her presence always seemed to set my teeth on edge. I shook my head, trying to ignore her. That was until I heard Emma's desperate cry. I spun around to see her face pressed against the window, her tiny hands reaching up in panic. "Mommy, it's too hot. Let me out." My stomach dropped. I rushed to the car door, yanking on the handle, but it was locked. I screamed her name, my heart pounding as I tried to wrench the door open with all my strength. The heat from the car felt suffocating, and the air inside was thick, like a heavy blanket that wrapped around my chest. Then I saw it. Karen's car parked just inches away, her smug face still visible in the driver's seat as she casually checked her phone, oblivious to the fact that my child was trapped in a boiling hot car. The rage inside me exploded. "Karen!" I screamed. "Open the door." But she didn't move. Not an inch. And that was when I knew it was on. It wasn't supposed to be this way. When my family moved into this quiet suburban neighborhood, I imagined peace. A place where I could raise Emma without the constant stress of city life. A place where she could play outside without worry. A place where we could finally find normalcy. But that dream quickly soured when I met Karen. At first, it seemed innocent enough. She greeted me with a smile, introduced herself as the HOA president, and handed me a pamphlet about community guidelines. It felt like the typical neighborly gesture, albeit a little rigid. But what I didn't know then was that she had an agenda that would soon make my life unbearable. In the beginning, I tolerated her nagging, her constant inspections, her disapproving glares at my lawn that wasn't green enough, or the minor violations she found in the most innocent of things, like the way our mailbox stood a little too tall or the tree that wasn't trimmed just right. It wasn't the rules that bothered me. It was the way Karen wielded her power. She wasn't just enforcing them. She was using them to make herself feel superior, to impose her control over everyone around her. At first, I fought back with patience. I adjusted the mailbox, trimmed the tree, made sure the lawn was immaculate. But each time I complied, it only seemed to fuel her sense of authority. She started showing up unannounced, dropping by with complaints that weren't even valid. It became clear Karen wasn't just the HOA president. She was a bully, a woman who thrived on the fear and discomfort of others. Things got worse when she started involving herself in my personal life. She'd pop up at the park when Emma and I were playing, reminding me of the community rules that had nothing to do with anything. One day, she even stopped me while I was unloading groceries, commenting on how unorganized my car was. There were no boundaries with Karen, no respect for privacy. But that day, the day Emma was locked in the car, was different. That was when everything changed. I had just parked the car in the small shopping plaza near the park. The sun was relentless, and Emma was already complaining about the heat. "Mom, it's too hot. Let's go, I want to go home," she whined from the back seat. It was only supposed to be a quick stop at the store to grab a few things. But as I stepped out, I heard Karen's voice behind me. "You're always rushing around, aren't you? Always in such a hurry to go somewhere." I turned to look at her. Her posture was tense, arms crossed as she stood just a few feet away. I gave her a polite, forced smile, trying to be cordial despite the irritation already bubbling inside me. But she didn't seem to notice my lack of enthusiasm. "You know," she continued, her voice dripping with mock sweetness, "I've been meaning to tell you about your yard again. It's really becoming a nuisance." I blinked in disbelief. "Not today, Karen. I'm just trying to get Emma home before this heat gets worse." But she wasn't having it. "You really should take better care of it," she added, her tone more demanding now. "Your house is the only one that looks, well, let's just say, not up to the neighborhood standards." I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my composure. I was just about to tell her to mind her business when I heard it. Emma's voice, faint and desperate, coming from inside the car. "Mommy," she cried. "It's too hot. I can't breathe. Please let me out." My stomach turned. I spun around to see her face pressed against the window, her tiny hands pressing against the glass. The car had been baking in the sun for several minutes, and the inside temperature had to be unbearable. "Emma," I screamed, running toward the car, my heartbeat quickening with panic. "Hold on, sweetie. I'm coming." I tried pulling on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. I whirled around, eyes frantic, searching for any help. That's when I saw Karen, still standing by her car, looking completely unbothered. She hadn't moved an inch. "Karen," I shouted, my voice rising with desperation. "Help me. My daughter is locked in the car. Call 911. She glanced up at me, unfazed, as if I was asking her to do something inconsequential. "You know," she said, the corners of her mouth twitching into a smile, "I'm not really sure it's my problem." I was stunned. This wasn't happening. My mind raced, trying to process what she was saying. Was she seriously standing there, watching, while my 4-year-old screamed inside a car that was growing hotter by the second? "Karen, open the door." I screamed again, my voice shaking with fury. "Now!" But instead of helping, Karen stood there, cold and indifferent. I could see the shadow of a smile tugging at her lips, as if she were enjoying my distress. I couldn't believe it. This was beyond anything I'd ever imagined. Karen wasn't just a nuisance anymore. She was a threat to my child. Panic surged through me like an electric shock. My daughter was inside that car, and every second felt like an eternity. I could see her small hands pressed against the glass, her face a picture of fear. I tried again to open the door, but it was locked tight, the heat radiating from the car, making it feel like an oven. The air inside was thick, suffocating. "Karen!" I screamed once more, barely able to contain my fury. "Open the damn door now." But she just stood there, arms crossed, unfazed by the chaos unfolding in front of her. She looked at me as if I were the one causing a scene. "I told you," she said coldly, her voice devoid of any real concern. "This is really none of my business." My mind screamed at me to do something, to make her listen. I knew that I couldn't waste another second, so I turned and ran toward the front of the store, hoping to find someone who could help. I wasn't thinking clearly, my only goal to get Emma out of that oven. But as I ran, something inside me snapped. I stopped dead in my tracks, my breath coming in sharp gasps. No, I wasn't going to wait for someone else to help. This wasn't just about my daughter anymore. It was about taking control of a situation that had spiraled out of my hands for too long. I turned back around to face Karen. "I've had enough of you, Karen," I shouted, stepping toward her. "You think you can control everything, don't you? You've been bullying us all for months. You've used your little HOA position to push everyone around. Well, you're not in charge here. Not anymore." Her eyes flickered with surprise, but she quickly masked it with a haughty expression. "I think you're overreacting," she said, her voice ice cold. "You don't need to make a scene." I took another step closer, my voice steady and firm. "You locked my daughter in a car. You watched her scream for help and did nothing. You think that's something a decent person does." She took a small step back, her confidence starting to waver. "It wasn't that bad. She'll be fine. That's not the point, Karen. You could have helped. You chose not to," I said, my tone cutting through the air. "I don't care what your position is in this neighborhood. I don't care if you think you're untouchable. You are wrong." Her smug smile faltered for a moment, and it felt like a win, like a crack in her armor. But then, she straightened herself up, brushing imaginary dust off her jacket. "You're being dramatic," she said with a sneer. "And you're out of line. I'm calling the authorities." Something inside me clicked. As she reached for her phone, I knew exactly what to do. I stepped forward, my voice lowering, but the gravity of it hit her like a freight train. "Do you really want to do that, Karen?" I asked. "You think you could just get away with this? Do you know who I am?" Her hand froze halfway to her phone, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. I took another step closer, lowering my voice to make sure she could hear every word. "I'm the one you've been messing with. I'm the one who's been quietly watching your reign of terror over this neighborhood. You might be the HOA president, but I lead the SWAT team in this city. I don't just stand by and let people get hurt. I protect my own. For the first time, Karen's face turned pale. The confidence she had so easily displayed evaporated in the face of my revelation. "W, what are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice trembling. I stepped forward again, my eyes narrowing, locking onto hers. "I'm not just some mom you can intimidate, Karen. I'm a trained professional. I've dealt with far worse than you, and I don't hesitate to do what's necessary to protect my family. So think carefully about what you do next." She backed away slowly, her hand still clutching her phone, but she didn't dare make a move to call anyone now. I could see the realization dawning on her. She had underestimated me, just like she had underestimated everyone else in this neighborhood. "You should leave," I said calmly, my voice steady but hard. "Now, before you make things worse for yourself." Karen looked at me, her lips trembling slightly, before she finally turned and walked away. Not with the usual arrogant stride, but with the same sense of defeat that had plagued her for the first time in as long as I could remember. As I watched her retreat, I felt a sense of power course through me, not just because of the confrontation, but because for the first time in a long while, I had taken control of my life, of my daughter's safety, and of the situation that had spiraled out of control. I ran back to the car, my heart pounding in my chest, and flung open the door. Emma was sweating, her face flushed, but still very much alive. I scooped her up into my arms, holding her tightly as she clung to me, her little body trembling. "Mommy, it was so hot," she whispered, her voice soft with fear. "I know, baby," I whispered, brushing her hair back from her face. "I'm so sorry. Mommy's here now. You're safe." As I held her, I realized something deep down. Karen had pushed me to my limits, but I wasn't going to let her control me anymore. I had the strength to fight back, not just for me, but for everyone she had ever hurt. And I wasn't going to stop until she understood that. After the confrontation, I thought I would finally get some peace. I had stood my ground, exposed Karen for who she truly was, and made it clear that I wasn't going to back down. But what I hadn't counted on was the relentless backlash that followed. The next few days felt like a storm cloud hanging over me, a constant threat waiting to break. Karen wasn't one to accept defeat quietly. I knew she wouldn't let it go, not when she had so much pride and control wrapped up in her HOA position. It started with the neighbors. I knew that Karen had a few loyal followers, but I didn't realize how many until I saw the looks from the people who once waved at me in the street, now avoiding my eyes. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some people gave me polite smiles, but I could feel the tension. The air was thick with judgment. Karen had undoubtedly turned the entire neighborhood against me, painting me as the troublemaker who had disrupted her peaceful world. But the worst part was when I received a letter from the HOA. The tone was civil, but the message was clear. I was now under scrutiny. It was a formal complaint about my aggressive behavior during the incident at the parking lot. It outlined how I had raised my voice, interrupted a peaceful community gathering, and even suggested I might not be suitable for this neighborhood. The nerve of her. I was fuming as I read through the letter. They had twisted everything, made it look like I was the one who was out of control. But what struck me the hardest was the thinly veiled threat at the end. It said that further complaints would be filed if I didn't adjust my behavior and follow the community guidelines to the letter. It was clear that Karen was using her power as HOA president to punish me. She wanted to force me out of the neighborhood, but I wasn't going to let her. I refused to let her drag me down again. I sat down with Emma, trying to hold it together. She could sense something was off, her little eyes flicking between me and the letter. "Mommy, why is Karen mad at you?" she asked softly, her innocent voice breaking my heart. "Because Karen doesn't like it when people stand up to her," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But don't worry, sweetheart, we're going to be okay." I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. Here I was, a trained SWAT team leader, someone who had faced down dangerous situations, but the emotional toll Karen had taken on me was unlike anything I had ever felt. She wasn't just attacking me, she was attacking my family. And that was something I wouldn't stand for. But Karen wasn't done. She escalated things in a way I hadn't anticipated. A few days later, I received a phone call. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it anyway. "Hello," I said, my voice guarded. "Is this your name?" A woman's voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" I replied, already feeling a sense of unease. "This is Officer Thompson with the local police department. I'm calling to inform you that we've received a report from your neighbor, Karen Westbrook, regarding an incident that occurred at the shopping plaza." I felt my heart skip a beat. "What now?" The officer continued. "She's filing a formal complaint against you for harassment and aggressive behavior. We'll be needing you to come in for a statement." The blood drained from my face. Karen had gone as far as involving the police. This wasn't just about control anymore. She was trying to ruin me. I couldn't believe it. I was a SWAT team leader. I had worked with law enforcement for years, had earned the respect of my colleagues. And now, this woman was using her influence to drag me through the mud, making false claims just to get revenge. But I wasn't going to let her break me. I knew how this system worked. I wasn't going to let her turn my life upside down. I called my lawyer immediately. The conversation was tense, but it was clear that I wasn't alone in this. I had the law on my side, and I wasn't going to let Karen twist the narrative. Over the next few days, the legal team went to work. My lawyer reached out to Officer Thompson, and it wasn't long before the police department started asking more questions about Karen's claims. They were skeptical, and they should have been. There was no evidence to support her accusations. But it wasn't just about clearing my name. I had to take action to make sure that Karen's reign of terror didn't continue. I had to expose her for what she was doing to me, to everyone in the neighborhood. I made the decision to fight back, not just with legal documents, but by using the truth as my weapon. As I sat at my kitchen table, papers and legal documents spread out in front of me, I felt a strange sense of clarity settle over me. I had spent so much of my life in a world of structured rules and responsibility, leading a SWAT team, following procedures, enforcing justice. But Karen had thrown me into a world of manipulation, lies, and petty power games. And in this world, there were no rules. I knew I had to dig deeper, find out everything I could about Karen. The truth was the only weapon I had left. I couldn't let her destroy my family, and I couldn't let her get away with her actions, especially when it came to her using her HOA position to make everyone miserable. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every single person who had been pushed around by her over the years. I started by gathering information from the neighbors. Some of them had been too scared to speak up before, but after my confrontation with Karen, they seemed more willing to share their experiences. It didn't take long for me to find out just how deep her manipulation ran. One of the neighbors, an older man named Mr. Holloway, had lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone. He had seen the changes Karen had brought over the years. At first, he had been one of her supporters, convinced that her strict enforcement of HOA rules was for the best. But as time passed, he realized something darker was at play. "She's not just the HOA president," Mr. Holloway told me one afternoon when I stopped by his house. "She's been using the position to get rid of people she doesn't like. Those who speak out against her, they get a violation letter. People who are just trying to live quietly in their homes, they get dragged into her web. I've seen it happen too many times, but I never had the guts to say anything." I was stunned. It wasn't just about rules. It was about control. She had built an empire based on fear, using her power to crush anyone who dared to question her authority. But now, it seemed the walls were crumbling. Mr. Holloway wasn't the only one who spoke out. Another neighbor, Lisa, told me about an incident that had occurred a few years ago when Karen had forced a couple out of their home. They were a young family, just starting out, and Karen had been relentless. She targeted them for minor infractions, too many weeds in their garden, a broken fence panel, and before they knew it, they were being fined daily. The family eventually gave up, sold the house, and left the neighborhood, all because of Karen's oppressive tactics. The more I dug, the more I uncovered. This wasn't just a personal vendetta against me. It was part of a much larger pattern of manipulation and coercion. Karen had been running a campaign of terror behind the scenes, all the while hiding behind her status as HOA president. But the biggest revelation came when I managed to dig up Karen's past. I hadn't realized it before, but Karen had been in law enforcement years ago. She had worked as an officer in a nearby city, before mysteriously leaving the force under what appeared to be questionable circumstances. The records weren't entirely clear, but there were whispers about her involvement in an internal investigation, something about excessive force and misconduct. This was the key. Karen wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was a woman who had been in a position of real power before, a woman who had abused it. Her exit from law enforcement was conveniently swept under the rug, and no one ever questioned her authority again. But now I had the pieces. I knew exactly what she was capable of. I felt a wave of determination wash over me. I wasn't just going to stand by and let her tear apart this community. I had the power to expose her, to reveal her true nature to everyone. I wasn't going to be the only one fighting this battle. I took the information I had gathered and reached out to the local news. They had been following Karen's rise in the HOA for a while, and they were interested in the story. The reporter who took my call was skeptical at first, but when I laid out the details of her past, the patterns of behavior in the neighborhood, and the lies she had been spreading, the reporter's tone changed. "We've been hearing rumblings about Karen for years," the reporter said, "but we've never had anyone come forward with concrete evidence. This is big." I wasn't done yet. With the help of the reporter, I contacted more former neighbors who had been affected by Karen's manipulations. It was only a matter of time before her reign of terror was exposed for everyone to see. The moment I had been waiting for finally arrived. The story broke, and Karen's carefully constructed facade came crumbling down. The local news aired the segment, detailing her history in law enforcement and her abuse of power in the HOA. Neighbors spoke out about the countless ways she had made their lives miserable, and it was clear that Karen's time in control was over. The fallout was swift. The HOA board, which had been complicit in Karen's actions, was forced to act. They suspended her from her position and began an internal investigation into her conduct. Within a week, Karen was stripped of her role as HOA president. The control she had wielded for so long was finally taken from her. And me? I walked away from it all with my head held high. Not only had I saved my daughter from harm, but I had exposed the truth. I had taken down the woman who thought she was untouchable, and I had done it with courage, conviction, and the support of a community that was finally ready to stand up to her. The days following Karen's fall from grace felt surreal. The weight that had been hanging over me, over the entire neighborhood, finally started to lift. The phone calls, the whispers, the fear that had clouded every conversation. Everything seemed to settle into a sense of peace. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The neighborhood wasn't perfect, of course. People were still cautious, still unsure of what would come next. But there was an undeniable shift in the air. The facade of Karen's control was gone, and the community had started to rebuild in ways that mattered. It wasn't just about Karen losing her position. It was about the reclaiming of power, of dignity, and of standing up for what was right. I had set out to protect my family, but in doing so, I had shown the rest of the neighborhood what true strength looked like. And in return, I had earned their respect, their trust, and their gratitude. One afternoon, I was sitting on my front porch, Emma curled up next to me with a book, when I saw the familiar face of Mr. Holloway walking down the sidewalk. He waved as he approached, his usual solemn expression softened by a small smile. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "What you did, standing up to Karen, it gave a lot of us the courage to speak out. She had us all in fear, and no one knew how to stop her. You did." I nodded, not sure what to say. The truth was, I hadn't done it alone. I had the support of my family, the neighbors who had stood by me, and the people who were willing to tell their stories. It wasn't just me who had fought this fight. It had been a collective effort. "I'm just glad it's over," I replied, my voice quieter than usual. "But there's still work to be done. People shouldn't have to live in fear anymore. We can all do better." Mr. Holloway nodded, his eyes gleaming with appreciation. "You're right. We've all been walking on eggshells for too long. Now we know what happens when we stand up to the bullies." As he walked away, I felt a sense of pride swell in my chest. This wasn't just about Karen being taken down. It was about creating a community that worked together, that supported each other. We had broken the cycle of fear, and we were better for it. Later that evening, I found myself sitting down with Emma at the dinner table. She was playing with her food, lost in thought. I had noticed that the past few days had been quieter for her, more peaceful. I could see the difference in her eyes, the worry that had once clouded them slowly dissipating. "Mommy," she said softly, breaking the silence. "I'm glad Karen is gone. I don't want anyone to be mean to you again." I smiled, reaching across the table to take her hand in mine. "I don't want anyone to be mean to you either, sweetie. But I want you to know something important. Standing up to bullies, standing up for what's right, it's never easy. But it's always worth it. We're strong, and we'll always protect each other." She looked at me, her small face serious but full of understanding. "I know, Mommy. You're like a superhero." I chuckled, squeezing her hand. "I'm not a superhero, sweetheart. I'm just your mom. But I'll always do whatever it takes to keep you safe." It was in that moment that I realized how far we had come. The struggle had been long and difficult, but the reward was priceless. My daughter, who had once been trapped in that car, now sat in front of me, safe, secure, and no longer surrounded by the shadow of Karen's tyranny. The next few weeks passed with a quiet sense of satisfaction. Karen never returned to the neighborhood, and the HOA board cleaned up the mess she had left behind. No one was interested in taking up her mantle. They had seen the damage she had caused, and they weren't about to let anyone else fill her shoes. But the true victory was in the people, the neighbors who had been afraid to speak up, the friends who had quietly suffered under her reign. They were now finding their voices, standing tall, and working together to rebuild what had been broken. They had witnessed firsthand what it meant to fight for what's right, and they were stronger for it. As for me, I learned that sometimes the greatest battles are the ones you fight not just for yourself, but for others. It was easy to get caught up in the personal stakes of what Karen had done to me, but the real power was in standing up for a community, for the people who couldn't or wouldn't stand up for themselves. And I realized that, in the end, that was the most rewarding part of the fight. I was no longer just a mother trying to protect her child. I was a part of something bigger. And nothing, not even Karen, could take that away from me.